My sister-in-law lied to everyone after I refused to let her raise one of my twins, so I exposed the truth and destroyed her image forever. I never imagined that the phrase, "it takes a village to raise a child," would be used as justification for someone trying to claim one of mine. My name is Rachel Adams. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a project manager for a mid-sized tech company. 3 months ago, I gave birth to identical twin boys, James and Jacob, after years of trying to conceive. My husband Tom and I were over the moon. The pregnancy had been smooth, the delivery went well, and both babies were healthy. For the first time in years, everything in my life felt perfect. The trouble started when we brought the boys home from the hospital. Tom's sister Victoria, who's 35 and works as an interior designer, came to visit us that first week. I expected her to be excited about becoming an aunt, maybe bring some gifts or offer to help with meals. Instead, she walked into our living room, barely glanced at me recovering on the couch, and went straight to the baby's cribs. "They're so identical," she said, not in the way most people do when they're marveling at twins, but in this strange, calculating tone. "You can barely tell them apart." I laughed it off at first. Yeah, the pediatrician says it's pretty rare for twins to be this similar. Even I have trouble sometimes. But Victoria kept staring at them with this intense look that made me uncomfortable. She didn't coo over them, or ask to hold them like most visitors did. Instead, she asked weird questions. "Don't you think raising 2 babies will be exhausting? Have you thought about how expensive this will be? Do you really think you can give them both the attention they need?" Tom was in the kitchen making coffee and didn't hear most of this conversation. I tried to brush off the strange vibe Victoria was giving me, telling myself she was probably just processing becoming an aunt. Maybe she was worried about us, or maybe she didn't know how to act around babies. But something in my gut told me this wasn't normal concern. Over the next few weeks, Victoria started visiting more frequently. She'd always time her visits for when Tom was at work, which should have been my first red flag. She'd sit in our living room, watching me struggle with feeding both babies, changing diapers, trying to get them on a sleep schedule, and she'd make these comments that felt helpful on the surface but left me feeling worse. "You look so tired, Rachel. This is really hard on you, isn't it?" she'd say. Or, "I don't know how you're managing this alone." Tom worked such long hours one afternoon when the babies were about 6 weeks old. Victoria came over with coffee and pastries from my favorite bakery. I was grateful for the gesture, and started to think maybe I'd been reading too much into her previous visits. We sat in the living room while both boys napped, and for the first time she seemed genuinely interested in talking about them. "They're beautiful babies," she said, sipping her latte. "You and Tom are so lucky." "We really are," I agreed, feeling myself relax for the first time in weeks. Then Victoria got this look on her face, like she was working up to saying something important. "Rachel, I've been thinking about something, and I hope you won't take this the wrong way." My stomach immediately knotted up. "What is it?" "Well, you know, Mark and I have been trying to have children for years. We've been to specialists, tried everything, and it's just not happening for us." She paused, looking down at her hands. "Seeing you with the twins has made me realize something. Maybe this is meant to be." I had no idea where she was going with this, but I felt my heart starting to race. "What do you mean?" Victoria looked up at me with this expression that I can only describe as determined. "I mean, what if this is the universe's way of giving us the family we've always wanted? You have 2 beautiful, healthy boys, and honestly, Rachel, I can see how hard this is on you. You're exhausted, you're stressed, and Tom's working so much that you're basically doing this alone." "Victoria, Hear me out," she interrupted, leaning forward. "What if Mark and I took one of the boys? Think about it. You'd only have one baby to focus on, which would be so much easier for you, and we'd finally have the child we've been dreaming of. It would still be in the family. The boys would grow up as cousins instead of brothers, but they'd still know each other." I stared at her in complete shock. For a moment, I couldn't even process what she was suggesting. "Victoria, are you asking me to give you one of my children?" "I'm not asking you to give him away," she said quickly. "I'm suggesting we share. This could work out perfectly for everyone. You get to be less overwhelmed, we get to be parents, and the baby gets to have a family who desperately wants him." I felt like I was in some kind of alternate reality. "They're my sons, Victoria. Both of them. They're not puppies from a litter that I'm looking to place in good homes." Her face immediately changed. The sweet, concerned expression vanished. replaced by something much colder. "I'm trying to help you here, Rachel. You're being selfish." Selfish? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Yes, selfish. You have 2 healthy babies when there are people like Mark and me who would give anything for just one. And you're so overwhelmed you can barely function. I'm offering to help raise one of them, and you're acting like I'm trying to steal from you. I stood up from the couch, my hands shaking with anger. "Because you are trying to steal from me. You're asking me to hand over my child like he's a spare." Victoria stood up too, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw her true personality. "Fine. Be overwhelmed, struggle. But don't come crying to me when you realize you can't handle this." She left that day without saying goodbye, and I immediately called Tom at work. When I told him what had happened, there was this long pause on the phone. "She what?" he finally said. "She asked me to let her and Mark raise one of the twins. She said it would be easier for me and fair to them." Another pause. That's crazy, Rachel. She can't be serious." But I could hear something in his voice that worried me. It wasn't the immediate outrage I'd expected. It was more like he was trying to process something complicated. "Tom, you don't think there's any merit to what she said, do you?" "No, of course not," he said quickly. "The boys are our sons, both of them. I know how hard this has been on you, and Victoria's been struggling with infertility for so long. Thomas Adams, if you're even considering this." "I'm not. I'm just saying I understand why she might have thought." "Never mind. It was inappropriate of her to ask. We'll talk when I get home." But when Tom got home that evening, he seemed distant. He held both babies, played with them, helped with their bedtime routine, but I could tell he was thinking about something. Finally, after we'd gotten them settled for the night, I confronted him. "What's going on in your head right now?" He sighed and sat down on our bed. "Victoria called me at work after she left here." My blood pressure spiked immediately. "What did she say?" "She was crying. She said you were cruel to her, that you acted like she was trying to hurt the family when she was just trying to help everyone." He looked up at me. "Rachel, I know my sister. She's not malicious. Maybe she just didn't express herself well." "Didn't express herself well?" "Tom, she asked me to give her one of our children." I know. But think about it from her perspective. She's been trying to have a baby for 4 years. She's had 3 miscarriages. And then she sees us with 2 healthy babies, and you've been so stressed and exhausted." I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. "Are you taking her side?" "There are no sides here," Tom said, but his tone told me otherwise. "I'm just saying maybe we could have handled it better. She's family, Rachel. She's hurting." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Tom slept beside me. I kept replaying the conversation with Victoria, then the conversation with Tom, trying to understand how I'd suddenly become the villain in this story. I was the one who'd carried these babies for 9 months, who'd given birth to them, who was getting up every 2 hours to feed them. And somehow I was the one being called selfish for wanting to keep my own children. The next morning, Tom's mother called while he was at work. I should have known Victoria would escalate this. "Rachel, honey, Victoria told me about your conversation yesterday," she said in that tone that sounds sweet but has steel underneath it. "I think there might have been some misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding, Margaret. Victoria asked me to let her raise one of my sons." "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds harsh." But Victoria explained to me what she really meant. She knows how overwhelmed you've been, and she thought maybe she and Mark could help out more, maybe even have the baby stay with them sometimes to give you a break. I realized Victoria had completely rewritten the story she'd told her mother. "Margaret, that's not what she said. She specifically suggested that one of the twins could grow up as her son instead of mine." "Oh, Rachel, I'm sure you misunderstood. Victoria would never suggest taking a baby away from his mother. She was probably just offering to help, and maybe you were so tired you heard it wrong." This was the moment I realized I was dealing with something much more serious than a sister-in-law with boundary issues. Victoria had deliberately told her mother a different version of events, one that made me look unstable and unreasonable. "Margaret, I know exactly what I heard. Honey, Victoria is just heartbroken about her infertility struggles. Maybe you could be a little more compassionate. She loves those babies already, and she just wants to be involved in their lives." After I hung up, I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I overreacting? Had I misunderstood Victoria's intentions? But then I remembered the look in her eyes when she was talking about the twins, the calculating way she'd suggested sharing one of them, and I knew I hadn't imagined anything. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Victoria started showing up at family gatherings with printouts about the benefits of children having multiple caregivers. She'd make comments about how territorial new mothers could be, and how important it was for children to bond with their extended family. Margaret started making suggestions about how I should let Victoria babysit more often, how it would be good for me to have help. Meanwhile, I was getting conflicting messages from Tom. He'd reassure me that the boys were our sons and no one else's, but then he'd suggest that maybe I was being too rigid about letting family help out. He'd say things like, "Victoria just wants to feel included, or maybe we could let her take one of them for an afternoon sometime, just to give you a break." I started to feel like I was surrounded by people who thought my maternal instincts were somehow wrong or selfish. Every time I expressed discomfort with Victoria's increasingly demanding behavior, I was told I was being unfair to her because of her infertility struggles. The breaking point came when the twins were about 10 weeks old. Tom's extended family was having a barbecue to welcome the new babies, and I was actually looking forward to it. I thought it would be nice to have everyone meet James and Jacob properly, and maybe some of the tension with Victoria would ease up in a group setting. I was wrong. Victoria had apparently spent the weeks leading up to this gathering campaigning among the family members. When we arrived, several aunts and uncles made comments like, "Victoria told us how hard this has been for you, and it's so nice that Victoria wants to help out with the babies." But the worst moment came when we were all sitting around the backyard, and Margaret stood up to make a toast. "I want to welcome our two newest family members," she said, raising her glass toward where I was sitting with James and Jacob, "and I want to say how proud I am of how our family comes together to support each other during challenging times." She looked directly at Victoria when she said this, and Victoria smiled in this way that made my skin crawl. "Victoria has shown such grace and generosity in offering to help Rachel with these beautiful boys," Margaret continued. "It takes a village to raise children, and I'm so glad Victoria and Mark are willing to be such a big part of that village." Several family members murmured agreement, and I felt like I was watching my children being slowly claimed by someone else. But what happened next made everything crystal clear. Victoria stood up and walked over to where I was sitting. Without asking, she reached down and picked up James from my lap. "Come to Aunt Victoria, sweetheart," she cooed, but there was something possessive in the way she held him. She walked around the yard, showing him off to various family members, talking about him like he was partly hers. "Isn't he perfect?" she said to Tom's cousin. "I've been helping Rachel so much with both boys. This little guy especially seems to respond to me." When she said that, something snapped inside me. I stood up, walked over to her, and held out my arms. "I'll take him back now." Victoria's face changed. "Oh, we're fine. He's not fussing. Victoria, give me my son." The entire backyard went quiet. Everyone was staring at us and I could feel their judgment, but I didn't care anymore. Victoria reluctantly handed James back to me, but as she did, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I guess some mothers just can't share." That's when I lost it. "Share?" I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You want to talk about sharing? Let me tell you what my sister-in-law asked me to share." I turned to face the entire gathering. 3 weeks ago, Victoria came to my house and asked me to let her and Mark raise one of my sons. Not babysit him occasionally, not help out when I need it, but actually raise him as their own child. When I said no, she told me I was being selfish for wanting to keep both of my own children. The backyard was dead silent. Victoria's face went white, then red. "That's not what I said," she protested, but her voice was shaky. "I offered to help because you were so overwhelmed. You asked me which twin I wanted to keep," I continued, and I could hear my voice getting louder. "You said it would be easier for me to raise one instead of two, and that you and Mark deserved to have the child you'd been wanting. You asked me to choose between my sons." Margaret stood up looking flustered. "Rachel, I think you're misremembering." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not misremembering anything, and I'm not going to stand here and let everyone act like wanting to keep my own children makes me a bad person." Tom, who had been silent through this entire exchange, finally spoke up. "Victoria, is that really what you asked her?" Victoria looked around at all the faces staring at her, and I could see her calculating whether she could continue lying. Finally, she burst into tears. "I just want a baby so badly," she sobbed. "It's not fair that some people get two when others can't have any." I thought maybe if Rachel only had one to focus on, it would be better for everyone. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the realization dawning on people's faces as they understood what Victoria had actually suggested. Tom's uncle David, who has 3 kids of his own, shook his head slowly. "Victoria, you can't ask someone to give up their child. That's not how families work." "But they're twins," Victoria said desperately. "They're identical. It's not like Rachel would be losing something unique." I felt physically ill hearing her talk about my sons like they were interchangeable objects. "They're not spare parts, Victoria. They're individual human beings. They're my sons." Margaret tried to salvage the situation. "I think everyone's emotions are running high here. Maybe we should all take a step back." "No," I said. "I'm done taking steps back. I'm done being told I'm overreacting when someone asks me to give away my child. I'm done being made to feel guilty for wanting to raise my own sons." I looked around at all the faces in that backyard, some shocked, some uncomfortable, some clearly taking Victoria's side. Then I looked at my husband, who was staring at his sister like he was seeing her for the first time. "Tom, we're leaving," I said. I didn't wait for his response. I gathered up both babies, got their diaper bag, and walked to our car. Tom followed a few minutes later, and we drove home in complete silence. That night, after we'd put the babies to bed, Tom and I had the most serious conversation of our marriage. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I thought Victoria was just, I don't know, maybe struggling with her infertility and not thinking clearly. I never imagined she actually asked you to give her one of our sons." "She did," I said quietly. "And when I said no, she tried to make me feel like a selfish monster." Tom ran his hands through his hair. "I can't believe she twisted the story when she talked to me and Mom. She made it sound like you'd been cruel to her for offering to help. She's been building a case against me for weeks," I realized out loud, "making me look unstable and overwhelmed, presenting herself as the perfect solution to a problem that doesn't exist. What do you want to do?" I looked toward the baby's room, where James and Jacob were sleeping peacefully in their cribs, completely unaware of the drama swirling around them. "I want to protect our sons," I said. "From all of this. From anyone who thinks they have a claim on them that supersedes ours as their parents. Even if it means cutting off my family?" I met his eyes. "If your family thinks I should give away one of my children to keep the peace, then yes, even if it means cutting them off." Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You're right. Our sons come first. Always." The next day I called Margaret and told her we wouldn't be attending any more family gatherings until Victoria acknowledged what she'd actually asked me and apologized for lying about it afterward. Margaret tried to convince me that Victoria had been misunderstood, and that I was breaking up the family over a miscommunication. "Margaret," I said, "your daughter asked me to give her one of my newborn sons. There's no miscommunication about that. Until she admits what she did and stops trying to make me look crazy for refusing, we won't be around her." "What about the boys? They deserve to know their family. They deserve to be protected from family members who see them as objects to be redistributed for everyone else's happiness." I hung up and immediately felt this incredible sense of relief, like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. Over the next few weeks, various family members called to try to mediate. Some of them had clearly been given Victoria's version of events and thought I was being unreasonable. But a few, like Tom's Uncle David and his wife Sarah, called to express their support. "We've been talking about what happened at the barbecue," Sarah said when she called. "I keep thinking about how I'd feel if someone asked me to choose which of my kids to keep. I probably would have done more than just leave the party." These calls helped me realize that not everyone thought I was crazy, and that my maternal instincts weren't wrong. Meanwhile, I started doing some research into Victoria's claims about her infertility. I felt guilty about it at first, but something about her story hadn't added up. She'd mentioned specialists and treatments, but I'd never heard any details, and in a family that shares everything, that seemed odd. What I discovered made everything click into place. Through some careful conversations with Mark's sister, I learned that Victoria and Mark had never actually been trying to have children. Victoria had been on birth control the entire time they'd been married. She'd told Mark she wanted to focus on her career first. And then when she saw how much attention pregnant women and new mothers got in the family, she'd started lying about fertility struggles to get sympathy and special treatment. When I realized that Victoria had been lying about trying to conceive, everything made sense. She didn't want to go through pregnancy and childbirth, but she wanted the result. She wanted a baby, but she wanted someone else to do the hard work of creating that baby. And when she saw that I had 2 identical babies, she thought she'd found the perfect solution. I told Tom what I'd discovered, and he was stunned. She's been lying to the whole family for years? It looks that way. And when she saw an opportunity to get what she wanted without having to actually get pregnant herself, she took it. Tom shook his head. I feel like I don't even know my sister anymore. As the weeks passed, the dust started to settle, but not in the way Victoria had hoped. Word got around the family about what she'd actually asked me, despite her attempts to control the narrative. Some family members were horrified when they understood what had really happened. Others tried to stay neutral, but even they stopped suggesting that I should be more accommodating to Victoria's needs. Victoria herself seemed to realize that her plan had backfired spectacularly. She stopped calling, stopped showing up uninvited, and according to Tom, she'd even stopped attending some family events where she knew we'd be discussed. Margaret continued to try to get me to be the bigger person and reach out to Victoria, but I held firm. I wasn't going to apologize for protecting my children, and I wasn't going to pretend that what Victoria had asked for was reasonable. The most surprising development came about 2 months after the barbecue confrontation. Mark, Victoria's husband, called Tom. I need to ask you something, he said. Did Victoria really ask Rachel to give you guys one of the twins? Tom confirmed that she had, and Mark was quiet for a long time. She told me Rachel had offered to let us babysit more, and that Rachel got angry when she accepted, Mark finally said. But some things haven't been adding up, and now I'm hearing a different story from other family members. It turned out that Mark had started questioning other things Victoria had told him, including her claims about their fertility struggles. When he confronted her, the whole house of cards came tumbling down. Within a month, Mark had moved out and filed for divorce. Apparently, Victoria had been lying to him about numerous things throughout their marriage, not just the fertility issues. He felt like he'd been married to a stranger. I felt bad for Mark, who seemed to be a genuinely good person who'd been manipulated by his wife. But I couldn't help feeling vindicated that Victoria's deception had finally caught up with her. As for Margaret, she eventually came around to understanding why I'd reacted the way I did. It took several months and some honest conversations with other family members, but she finally admitted that Victoria had been wrong to ask what she'd asked, and wrong to lie about it afterward. I was so focused on Victoria's pain about not having children that I didn't really think about what she was asking you to give up, she told me during a phone call. I'm sorry I didn't see it clearly at the time. We started rebuilding our relationship slowly. Margaret began visiting regularly to see the boys, and she never again suggested that I should share them with anyone. Now, 6 months later, as I watched James and Jacob playing together in their cribs, babbling to each other in that secret twin language that only they understand, I know I made the right choice. They're bonded in a way that's magical to witness. Sometimes I catch them holding hands while they sleep, or comforting each other when one starts crying. The idea that someone thought I should separate them, break that bond, so that she could have what she wanted, still makes me angry. Tom and I are stronger than ever. Going through this crisis showed me that when it really mattered, he chose our family over everyone else's expectations. It took him a little while to see Victoria's behavior clearly. But once he did, he never wavered in supporting our decision to protect our sons. Victoria, as far as I know, moved to another state after her divorce. I heard through the family grapevine that she started dating someone new and that she's telling people she's ready to start a family now. I hope for her sake and for any future children's sake that she's learned something from this experience. But honestly, I don't spend much time thinking about Victoria anymore. My energy goes to my family, to Tom, to James, to Jacob, and to building the life we want for them. I've learned that being a mother isn't just about loving your children, it's about protecting them from people who might harm them, even if those people are family members. It's about setting boundaries and sticking to them, even when other people call you selfish for doing so. The most important lesson I learned from this whole experience is that trust your instincts as a parent. When Victoria first made her suggestion, every cell in my body screamed that it was wrong, but I let other people make me question whether I was overreacting. I'm never going to do that again. If something feels wrong for my children, it is wrong, regardless of who's asking and what their reasons are. I also learned that being a good person doesn't mean sacrificing your children's well-being for other adults' happiness. Victoria's infertility struggles were real and painful, but they didn't give her the right to my sons. Her pain didn't make my protective instincts wrong or selfish. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no, even when it disappoints people you care about. These days, when I put James and Jacob to bed each night, I look at them sleeping side by side and feel overwhelmed with gratitude that they get to grow up together. They'll never know how close they came to being separated, and they'll never have to know the pain of being torn apart to satisfy someone else's desires. Tom often finds me standing in their doorway, just watching them sleep, and he'll put his arm around me and whisper, "You protected them." And I did. I protected them from someone who would have broken up their bond for her own purposes. I protected them from a family dynamic that would have taught them that love comes with conditions, and that their value was in what they could give to others rather than who they are as individuals. Most importantly, I protected them from ever doubting that they were wanted exactly as they are, together, as brothers, as the complete family we never knew we needed until they arrived. When people ask me now about the drama with Victoria, I tell them simply, I chose my children, and I always will. Looking back, I realize that Victoria did me a favor in a twisted way. She showed me exactly how fierce my love for my sons could be, and how far I was willing to go to protect them. She taught me that being a mother means being willing to be called selfish, unreasonable, or difficult when you're standing between your children and anyone who might harm them. Now, when I watch James and Jacob discover the world together, reaching for the same toys, babbling to each other, comforting each other when one is upset, I know with absolute certainty that keeping them together was the most important decision I've ever made. They belong together, just as they came into this world together, and no one will ever convince me otherwise. The twins are 7 months old now, and they're starting to develop distinct personalities despite looking identical. James is more serious and observant, while Jacob is the performer who's always trying to make people smile. But they're still completely bonded to each other, still sleep better when they're in the same room, still calm down faster when they can see their brother. Sometimes I imagine what would have happened if I'd given in to the pressure, if I'd let Victoria take one of them for everyone's good. I picture one of my sons growing up wondering why he was the one who got given away, the other growing up wondering where his other half went. The thought makes me physically sick. Instead, I get to watch them grow up together, and Tom and I get to parent them as the unit they were born to be. We're tired sometimes, yes, but we're not overwhelmed in the way Victoria predicted. We're a family, complete and whole, and that's exactly how it should be. I've learned to trust my instincts completely now. When something feels wrong for my children, I don't need anyone else's permission to protect them. I don't need to justify my decisions to people who don't have their best interests at heart. I don't need to apologize for being their mother first and everyone else's family member second. And most importantly, I've learned that the people who truly love you will support you when you're protecting your children, even if it's inconvenient for them. The people who ask you to sacrifice your children's well-being for their happiness aren't people you need in your life, regardless of how they're related to you. Today, as I write this story, James and Jacob are napping in their cribs, holding hands through the slats like they do every afternoon. In a few hours, Tom will come home from work and we'll have dinner together as a family of 4. It's ordinary and perfect and exactly what I fought to protect. When the boys are older and they ask me about why they don't see Aunt Victoria anymore, I'll tell them an age-appropriate version of this story. I'll explain that sometimes people ask for things that aren't theirs to give, and that it's okay to say no even when it makes other people upset. I'll teach them that they never have to give away pieces of themselves to make other adults happy, but mostly I'll tell them that they were wanted exactly as they came to us, together as brothers, as the perfect completion to our family. I'll tell them that their father and I moved heaven and earth to make sure they could grow up side by side, and that we'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because at the end of the day, that's what love looks like. Not giving people what they want from you, but protecting what matters most, no matter what it costs you. And my sons, both of them together as they were meant to be, will always matter most.